Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Neil McPhee. I'm a sports engineer and I'm an Associate Director of Sports Labs, of which ProPitch is our natural division. Today we're going to look at sustainable practices coupled with objective testing data during the DP World Tour Cazoo Classic at Hillside Golf Club. So buckle up, we've got a full body webinar. The slides will be available after. It's a question and answer session with the panel at the end, so you can load your questions in the top bar. And we will also produce a full body report later in the year. So we've got loads of great presenters today, keynote being Chris Ball, links manager at Hillside Golf Club, along with Eugene Hennessy at the European Tour. Chris really embraced this project and the sustainability angle, being transparent with all the data. So this project really started 18 months ago when myself and Chris and Matt were chatting about this as a case study. Myself and Matt LeBrun from Advanced Grass Solutions sit on the technical working group with BASIS, the British Association for Sustainability in Sport, and we wanted to do this and we've been building up to this. So today you'll hear from different presenters from ProPitch, Kerr Lambert from the R&D department, Matt from Advanced Grass Solutions, Ian Craig, our senior agronomic consultant, and also Chris Ball from Hillside Golf Club. So the question we pose is, how do we prove that using more sustainable practices can still produce elite tournament greens? Well, we believe in objective data, and with that, during the 5 days of the tournament Pro-Am to round 4, we took over 200,000 data points to measure all the different test results on the greens. So before we talk about the test, just a little bit about Sports Labs and our history. We've been a test institute for 20 years, working with loads of different sports and governing bodies. We operate through an ISO 17025 quality system, so quality control is paramount to what we do, and we operate with 55 members of staff in 4 continents. We're proud of the fact that we're innovation labs, an innovation test institute, and partner with a lot of governing bodies to help them produce test methods and equipment to be repeatable. So just again, a snapshot on the testing types and how we operate. So you can do independent assessments with yourself, or you can do self-assessments more regularly to really timestamp. The equipment that we produce is synced with assessments, and that equipment is both for inland and links golf courses. Now that can be loaded on your own app, your own portal. And that information then starts to trend, colour-coded traffic light system, scoring 1 to 5 in our system, and ultimately gives you a course passport and a stamp for trending. You can look at individual tests, or you can look at the whole course. And this is on your own system, your own portal, with a lot of functions available to be used and help you manage your course. So back to what we're going to talk about today, Hillside Golf Club. What did we do? We did testing through Pro-Am right the way through to round 4, 18 greens in the morning, and in addition to that, we did testing pre-tournament and also post-tournament. So we had test teams that were consistent throughout the week that tested a green in 7 minutes. Now, just before we talk about the test and some of the further insights and data, what's worth looking at is obviously global warming is a big issue, and what we experienced this summer at Hillside was very unusual in that we only had 1 millimetre of rain within 20 days of the tournament. That, coupled with increased temperatures, ambient air temperatures, obviously put the turf under a lot of stress, and it's something that we'll probably see more of in tournament and atmospheric conditions in the future. So we took all this information. What did we really do with it? Now, in a final, what we do call a report, we did a player caddy report every day, where you could see conditions on each green, from soil moisture right the way through to the speed, the green speed, and the firmness, and the consistency versus the course averages for all those tests. So these were produced in the morning. We went out before the players. And also for the benefit of the links manager, greenkeeper, or any agronomic interest, we've produced full body reports every morning as well for each round, where you could look at the test results and more information, color coded again. And this information was based on DP tournament testing. So what tests did we do? So TrueTrack is a innovation project and service that we've brought to the market this year. It is interpreting a free rolling golf ball during stimp. So we're looking at the accuracy of vertical and horizontal deviation of the ball. Some people refer to that as smoothness and trueness. Now that the software and algorithms is our own. We've built that. And the idea is you do it with very little equipment, so a smartphone can be used with basic equipment to do that, so it's accessible. And a true output is how many, Kerr will talk about this later in the presentation, but a true output shows where the ball deviates from the true line. Also simple things like moisture and firmness, taking those readings in 9 test locations on every green every day. Sword height, cut height, I believe Chris took the clipping rate some days as well, which is interesting information. And the green speed. Now we consider the green speed important, as does the player, but consistency across all greens is really paramount to performance of the player as well. In addition to that, we did take a botanical assessment on each stimp area on every green. Out of tournament, what did we do? To avoid damaging the surface during tournament, we didn't do these tests, but we did mass root depth, organic matter and infiltration. Okay, now we're going to pass over to Matt LeBrun from Advanced Grass Solutions. He's a business development manager for Sports Turf. Over to you, Matt, to set the scene before we discuss the data.
Thank you very much, Neil, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Matt LeBrun and I'm Business Development Manager for Advanced Grass Solutions. I'm going to talk to you today about a few of the long-term strategies that we're working on with Chris Ball at Hillside, and a little bit of history about where the actual testing platforms have developed from and how you can use that at your course as well. So one of the first things to touch on is the partnership between AGS and ProPitch, which we developed just over 1.5 years ago now. There's a few reasons behind this. One of them from an AGS perspective is that we get access to a pure independent view, objective measurements, database and technology that quantifies all of our product development, our work, our processing, our recommendations. So we're able to actually have our work independently quantified across the whole board of facilities that we're working on. The other aspect of that is that AGS staff and customers get access to all of the ProPitch technology and applications. So it gives us a full holistic approach to work with our customer base. We're not just able to supply you with the leading products, we're actually able to consult and support each individual customer and try and really understand your course in particular, or your facility in particular, and really get to know your mechanical procedures, your cultural practices, and tie this up with accurate product recommendations, and hopefully that leads to the leading results that we can possibly get amongst a broad spectrum of challenges that the industry is facing. The other aspect of this is a long-term research study. So we want to create the largest sports turf database in the world. And this is spanned across a complete diversity of sports facilities, looking at everything from playing quality, physical quality, to turf health and soil health. So this has been really successful in the football side, in the sports turf side, and has spanned over a number of years. And I think on the sports side, something like over 750,000 data points taken. And as we can continue to develop, this seemed like a no-brainer to transition the technology from ProPitch from the sports side into the golf side. And AGS approached numerous golf courses for different resources, builds, grass species, to get a really diverse database of information that we continue to build on. But I'm going to talk you through about with Chris. So the first things that we identified with Chris was what are the most important factors that are going to be the biggest risk to our golf course or golf greens. And it was unanimously decided that this was infiltration. So one of the first things that we were checking was infiltration rates, taking your soil core, looking at the thatch levels, looking at the root development, the grass coverage, and really kind of basic entry level assessments. But in the golf course environment, these are so important. And this is the type of thing that I would encourage somebody, if they're not doing any data collation, if you just start on the basics and a couple of times a year, actually looking at your infiltration results and your thatch levels, this will give you a really good picture as to what we should be aiming at for cultural practices, for renovations, for potential for waterlogging of the greens, and whether we need further assessments. We then took it a little step further, where we started looking at the player interaction with the green. So we looked at things like firmness, ball speed, we looked at firmness of the approach, we looked at trueness and smoothness, and you'll see all of this in the data as ProPitch go through it. And then obviously with Chris, we kept developing, which led up to the tournament support, the tournament prep that we are going through today. And what I would encourage everyone to do is, even if you start at a very, very simplistic data set, this can actually back you up in numerous different ways, whether it's to actually specify cultural, mechanical renovations, whether it's to communicate with the committee, whether it's to communicate with the golf course, whether it's to explain resources or time management. This is a really simple, easy and objective way to give you accurate key performance indicators of your greens performance, and then a pathway of improvements of how to actually get to the next star and how to avoid potential risks. So this is available through the AGS staff to the AGS customers. So if this is of interest, please contact us. Let us come and take some data and be part of the biggest turf database in the world. And working with Chris and Hillside from a development point of view has been fantastic. You know, Chris and Hillside always try to have an embrace of the Hillside experience. And one of the key factors that we've all been working on is running the most sustainable facility that we possibly can. And that's from the clubhouse all the way to the green. Now, Chris likes to work in long-term strategies, very similar to AGS and ProPitch. And I wanted to give you an insight into a few of the issues that we see coming up that we're going to be documenting, evaluating, and actually evidencing over the next few years. And this is long-term projects. The obvious ones I think are already out in the industry are minimal fungicide usage, minimal nitrogen usage, minimal insecticide. And all of these revolve around having a greater understanding of the environment, having objective data measurements. We have non-fungicidal disease strategies that we've been running for a few years. We have organic technology that we've really embraced. And then we're looking at plant parasitic nematodes, chafer grubs, leather jackets, of how we can actually cope and move through these processes without reaching for chemical applications or anything that's going to be harmful for the soil, or that has the minimal amount of harm to the soil possible. One of the key things I think that is coming up more and more in the last couple of years, especially the last year, is sustainable costs. The costs of fertilizer, the cost of living, has increased rapidly over the past year. So I think it's really important that we work at timing, application quantities, and really refine our applications, timing, application volumes to try and get the most out of our money. We've worked on decreased water usage, we've worked on decreased emissions, carbon footprint, and increasing soil biology. And this is through a variation of different factors that we've looked at, from data from wetting agents to setting up your sprinklers correctly to electric mowers, complete balanced approach, and having a real holistic approach on the environment as a whole and what impact, positive or negative, that each aspect is having on it. We aim to collate that together and release that information as we go further along. We've obviously been looking a lot at the soil biology, beneficial bacteria, and trying to monitor that and evidence it. And for me, it always comes down to having that full holistic approach, having the evidence to date it. One of the key things and the key questions that Chris has asked is that how sustainable can we have our practices, and can we still achieve the world's leading results in sports turf management? And as we go through the results and the playability, hopefully you'll find out for yourself. But in the meantime, if you'd like to know any more about AGS, about ProPitch, about what we've done at Hillside, please give us an email, get in contact, and I hope you really enjoy the webinar and feel free to ask any questions.
Thanks for that, Matt. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the testing data. So I'm going to hand over to Kerr Lambert from the ProPitch Research and Development team to talk about TrueTrack.
So just to reintroduce TrueTrack again, TrueTrack is a software which we have developed, which what it can do is measure the trueness and smoothness of golf greens. It's a ball tracking software which is used through camera technology, so we're taking video capture of the ball. And what it's essentially doing is it's calculating a percentage score based on the number of balls outlying from the ball's true line during a test. So typically from a TrueTrack test, we'll capture approximately 300 ball frames, which is kind of what you can see there in the blue images on the left. And what this meant is that over the course of the full tournament at Hillside, we captured over 200,000 data points using TrueTrack. What we have here in this graph is it's showing the average scores of all the greens across the tournament. So what we can see here is that all greens perform to an elite level throughout the whole tournament, and we can prove this from objective test data taken from TrueTrack. So what we see here is that the average vertical performance remained above 97%, and the average horizontal performance remained above 98%. What we can do with this data is that we can actually pick out greens, say here 3, 9 and 15 for vertical deviation, and we can see that they are falling slightly below the course average scores. They're kind of slightly lower than the other greens. And we can also pick out greens 10 and 17 as being slightly below average for horizontal deviation. So we can see just relative to the other greens, these greens are performing slightly lower in their score. Moving on to this graph here, this is the combined average score of TrueTrack, so taking the average of horizontal and vertical deviation to give more of an overall score. So what we can see is that green 4 averaged the best score throughout the tournament, and green 10 averaged the weakest score throughout the tournament. Really what the key takeaway here is that from this data it's possible to focus in on specific greens and see which ones maybe need a bit more attention to detail, which ones are performing well relative to others, and you can then from this data you can tailor your maintenance practices specifically to individual greens. This plot here, so this is showing the trends of how the greens perform rather than over the tournament as a whole, but day trends. So on the left here we have almost like the course average performance across the full tournament. So this is taking the average score of all the greens on each day for horizontal and vertical deviation. So you can plot almost how they're trending, potentially with different weather conditions, and just generally how they performed over the duration of the tournament. And from that, it's also then possible to hone in on an individual green as well and see day by day how was its performance over each day of the tournament. So looking specifically at those numbers to see on certain days how it was performing. Going into slightly more depth, even more so than just a day analysis, something that we were able to do at Hillside was we could look at, specifically after maintenance practices, how the greens were performing for TrueTrack. So what we have here is a plot for taking 5 true track tests on an individual green. So what we see here is the first measurement was taken on the morning, so after the greens were cut and roll, so immediately before play. The next point on the graph is in the evening after play, so we see a slight drop off in the performance. So this was then taken before maintenance, so we then carried out verticutting. After verticutting, we took another true track reading and we took the results from there. We then returned again in the morning to take the next day, and we see the difference in true track score the next morning, and then again, so that was the morning pre cut and roll, and then in the morning post cut and roll. So we can monitor all the scores as throughout these different maintenance techniques. What we can then look at here is something a bit more going insight into looking at true track versus stimp. So what we have here is the average stimp scores across the full tournament for each green, and then the average horizontal true track. So what we're looking at here is how true track is correlating with your stimp speed. So you can see the 2 lines of each. Your axis on the right is showing your stimp green speed, that's in centimetres, and on the left is the true track percentage. So then we can plot how the 2 lines are correlating with each other. So whether true track, horizontal true track percentage is relative to stimp, which if you follow the lines here, the peaks and troughs, you can see that certainly looks like it does. And also for this is then vertical, you can see how the lines follow each other for stimp versus true track percentage. So moving on to these data points we have here. So what this is the top graph is an analysis of true track before and after carrying out rolling. So this is what we did on the putting green, so we did this in the mornings before play. So we were able to carry out a true track test, record the data, then the green was rolled, and we then went back in again, and post rolling we then took another true track measurement. So what you can see is that there was a clear, you can see the numbers are change after rolling. So what we have is specifically in the vertical true track percentage that there's an increase there, you can see, of 3%. So if you take into account there's 300 data points taken over that roll, you can then equate that to almost sort of through rolling, you're taking 9 deviations out of the green across a stimp location. So here just validating how using these maintenance practices, you can see actually from numbers how it's proving that these methods are actually having an impact on the performance of the greens. This graph down the bottom, that is a test which we did on 1 green. So it was looking at we took the true track on 2 spots on the green, so a area with an NDVI of 75 and an NDVI of slightly lower at 63, and just looking at how the data again there can differ between 2 different conditions of the green, and looking at just the performance and how that's looking. Essentially, in summary, that's the sort of data that we're collecting over the tournament. This is also just a brief snippet of it. There was a lot of data, and there's so many different comparisons and things you can look into, such as looking at the stimp and the correlating with grass species and such like that. But I think the main takeaway here is that objective data can really help in providing targeted specific maintenance to localised locations on the golf course.
So leading on from what Ker's talking about, we can look more at the stimp or green speed testing, and what we can start to look at is the increase in speed throughout the tournament, which is really what you want as a tournament leading into the weekend. This is increased by 5 inches in round 3, round 4 from Pro-Am in round 1, and highlighting the consistency as well. There's certain outliers of green 7, green 11, green 6, where throughout the tournament these have then been brought in line with the other greens. For example, green 7 in round 3 and round 4 has been brought in line. Green 11 Pro-Am to round 1, and green 6 Pro-Am to round 1 as well. So this is key information we can use to spot check maintenance practices on individual greens, such as double cut, double roll, verti-cut, whatever Chris and Eugene thought was the right process to use to get those greens back in line. And that's something that was really important. I mean, we went out to each green, we tested each green in the morning at the crack of dawn in the putting green, then we went through all the other greens prior to play, and we took all the information. So it was the same technician, same area on the same mark on the putting green every day. So there was consistency. And I guess when we're looking at sustainable practices, electric motors, that's a key factor here. You know, can we manage elite greens with that type of maintenance equipment? And I think the answer is again yes here. And moving on to firmness. A lot of literature would suggest that anything above 130 gravities is alarm bells for a greenkeeper or a course manager. I think in this example we had a lot of readings in orange, as you can see, above 130. Some of the readings were up at 165, 178. And again, this is really important information to take, because in that climate and test conditions during the tournament, that's what was happening. And what we did see during tournament, that there was an increase in gravities around the high traffic areas, which you would expect around the pin locations, 20 gravities higher than the average of the green. And this is very evident, and it would then release and relax within 24 hours to the original average of the green. So that's something key, some key information that we took from the tournament testing collection. And these are snapshots of the player caddy report, where we're looking at the test results on the green. Again, highlighting in the middle there 178 on a green. So very high results. And that's something that we did on the approaches as well. So we did 9 readings on the greens, 9 readings on the approaches for all 18 greens every single day. And again, you can see the outlook, or the high readings on the approaches into the greens as well, which is considerably higher number of readings there. If we just look at the soil moisture content at 40 millimetres, the lowest reading during the week was on green 9 on round 1 at 7.1%, which is obviously quite alarmingly low, which Ian will discuss later. Any day, the lowest average was 10.2%, that was round 2, and the average for the whole week was 14.5%. So again, quite low numbers in terms of soil moisture and concern, or what would be concern in normal circumstances. If we look at the change throughout the tournament, the Pro-Am was 13.1%, round 1, 11.1%, 10.8% round 2, 16.1% round 3, and 21.3% round 4. Now we did have rain round 3 and round 4. But if we want to look at that coupled with furnace, the green 9 round 1 was 146 gravities. That went down to 120 gravities in round 4, and the moisture content went up to 23.2%. So some interesting numbers and figures there to consider, and we've done that across all greens all week. Okay, time to introduce Chris Ball, links manager at Hillside Golf Club. Him and Matt are going to discuss some insights and some of the practices and delivery of the tournament at Hillside during the DP World Tour Cazoo Classic this summer.
And firstly, Chris, thank you so much for all your support, your help in the development, and allowing us to be part of the whole process and continue to develop over the next couple of years. Now, with the actual Cazoo Classic, what was the timeline in preparation for that? How long were you actually putting things together to make sure that went absolutely flawlessly?
Yeah, as you know, we had the Masters a few years ago, and we'd experienced what the tour and the players' expectations were. So we determined to get to the point nearer to the tournament that we could give the keys over effectively to the European Tour to deliver the tournament with minimal extra work from ourselves, try and keep it as sustainable as possible. So once we got the tournament announced in the club, we started with all our back end work last year with overseeding, top dressing fairways, getting those sort of bigger jobs out the way. And in the process of doing that, we suddenly found out we've got the amateur in 23 as well. So we had to plan for both competitions, which was interesting because the two different people, the R&A and the European Tour, do things slightly differently. The main aim was to try and get all those little jobs done by Christmas, but also in that we had a series of course developments as well, which we'd already agreed for before both tournaments got announced. So that took most of our attention, but obviously I got appointed my agronomist, Eugene Hennessy from the Tour, and we began to work on a feeding and maintenance programme before the turn of the year. His brief to me was more of the same. We want them firm and fast, and I think that you'll remember it was pretty firm and fast in July. We didn't have any rain running into the tournament, and I don't think we could have got them firmer for the event. So we did a back end of sustain. We use a lot of sustain products on the greens. Back end of last year, we put another one out. I think it was in March, Matt, prior to you turning up with the boys from ProPitch. And we did plan, myself, you and Eugene, for another one in May, 6 weeks prior to the tournament. But it looks like the 2 apps we did earlier on in the year allowed us to not require that third one, and we managed the tournament with liquids. One thing we wanted to do with the tournament was continue the work at St Andrews, was use the electric triple mowers. So I think that was all part of our bigger overall plan of the sustainability on maintenance of golf courses.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at slide 2, I wanted just to speak about this quickly, because I think the overview that me and you talk about is being as sustainable as possible, but still delivering world-leading results. And a lot of the times in the top tiers, we talk about that kind of few percent at the top. And if you look at the True Track average, overall 18 greens, I think you've well and truly delivered that. I believe it was within kind of 2% there. And
yeah, and no, certainly it was fascinating to see the way we could get to that point, and we had a team from the gang and yourselves from ProPitch, you know, enabling us to record that and monitor that. You know, we had them here in March with yourself, and we started to think about, you know, how can we get to this point? How quick can we do it? You know, you can do it in football stadiums, you've got all day, but on a golf course, in a tournament with pressures of damage to the surfaces, you know, ahead of play. We spent a bit of time in March developing some different practices and recording those. I think you were part of that, Matt, when we were cutting and brushing the 4th green, and we were seeing different speeds, increases, decreases. And from that moment, I was thinking to myself, well, can we do that localized practices during the event if needed, based on the testing that the boys from the ProPitch did in the morning, and we could do some evening maintenance. The localized practice based on these results was brilliant. You know, we enabled us to do quite a little bit of stuff, which no doubt we're going to speak about in a minute.
Yeah, for sure. And just looking into the data a bit further, we've got the green speeds up now across all four days.
Yeah.
The consistency was fantastic, and as you said, I think actually us taking the data and having that in real time, kind of before, after play, did that allow you to actually do little tweaks on particular greens?
Yeah. I think with seeing the upward curve was always part of the plan. Obviously, when you're working with someone like Eugene, you know, prior to the tournament, you just got to go steady at the start of the tournament. You know, I think Eugene used the words glide the course into the tournament. You know, the crazy dry months prior to it and the record temperatures during the week made this gliding somewhat difficult and interesting. But the last thing you want when you've got televised tournaments, particularly in the first 2 rounds, and a 2T start with a full field of golfers, is crazy green speeds. You know, you've got a TV slot that the tour have got to fit this day's play into. So I think for the Masters, we used 10'2" as like a benchmark, you know, allowing for a bit of wind and hot weather. But with the hot weather forecast and very little wind, we knew we could slowly increase the green speeds. You know, I think we started looking at the chart. I think it was 10'2", and we ended up at 10'7". We maintained 10'2" for 2 days, jumped a little bit for 10'5" for the next 2, you know, for the next days. And then by the time the Sunday came, we had them pretty much all round about 10'7", based on the evening's work we were doing with the ProPitch results.
We found some really interesting stuff out when you started doing a few different cultural practices on different greens as to how that actually affected green speed, greens trueness. And if you look at slide 4, we picked one out in particular, which is green 3.
Yeah.
Performance throughout processing. Are these the results that you actually expected? Is it?
Oh, no, I think they're a little bit different to what you might have expected. You know, we could see the green was performing great. You know, just at the start of the tournament, it was getting results of 100%. But what we were seeing in the green speed during the day, this particular green, amongst, I think there was 3 others, Matt, that we were we were playing around with a little bit. They were dropping off pace during the day. So, you know, one evening we said, well, let's do a bit of this localized maintenance. We don't need to do all the greens. You know, all the greens are getting cut at night anyway. That's a pretty much given at most tournaments. So we decided to go out and I think it says verticut on the chart, but I think the more a groom unit that we use. And groom these 3 greens, and again with Neil and the team from ProPitch, we were able to go out and measure the variant results, and you can quite easily see there, you know, at the particular day, I think it was a Friday, Matt, I can't remember, but the green had dropped off. I say dropped off, it's dropped off a little percent, but you know, we're after perfection. We did a verticut and a post verticut result, then we put a rower over it and they were in behind us measuring that, and then we rolled it. And then you could see the next day it got itself back up to, I think it was, looking at that, it's just under 99% on the true track.
And we talked about this quite a bit, but I think the next kind of interesting process would be that if we can, as well as the kind of product size and how they react through the season, and really refining on different things that we're working on, you know, that me and you talk about for sustainability side and performance. I think it'd be really interesting, and I know you do too, if we actually started trying to measure a few differences after cultural practices. So things like Procore, things like vertidrain, things like overseeding. What would that actually give you as a course manager if you had a kind of data set as to how much each practice kind of affects the green smoothness and trueness?
I think it's just, you know, in day-to-day greenkeeping, we've always done historically the same things on every green. We'll go out and Procore all greens, but if you've got the ability to actually measure, does it need it? You know, you might only end up micromanaging a few greens. You know, you might say, well, that doesn't need it because my infiltration is good on that one, so what am I doing running a vertidrain over it for? You know, you'll save time. It's all part of the, you know, finding time and being sustainable and doing less of other practices, and in the long term, Matt, saving money because you can divert your stuff elsewhere. You know, I think we saw a real interest in was it the 3rd green again? I think the 3rd green was a big target for us most of the week. I think the interesting one we saw there was that we learned to trust our products. You know, we trusted the wetting agents, we trusted all the fertilizer we used in the winter. We recorded the data to prove that the products are working, and it really does go to show that you can stretch the perimeters of the grass plant in the tournament. Like you said, you can deliver a high quality tournament. And remember, Matt, we had some scary moisture readings and some extremely high clegg readings, you know.
Yeah, but however, if you look at the results, we were able to stretch the parameters, and I think Ian Craig will get into that in a bit more depth in the next kind of presentation. As an overview, Chris, for the whole tournament, is there any key things in particular that you took away from it, that the data actually enabled you to tweak your processes? And I think looking forward to the future, is this something that we're going to be doing again? Is this the kind of start of it? I presume it's not the finish.
No, I'd be disappointed if we don't all do it again next year in the amateur. It'd be interesting because this time we'll be working alongside the R&A, you know, again, and I think they could take something from it. They will have no doubt their own tournament set up. They're very successful at setting up the Open, but you know, we can bring some things to the party, like, you know, like the localized maintenance, like you know, if you're constantly recording your greens, you do develop a picture as a course manager which ones are performing differently, and that's all golf clubs. Every course manager has got his trigger greens in it, and his greens that always look good in the summer are the ones that always don't look as good in the summer. But we're having Neil and the team to come in and actually reference that and continually to reference it. It can only make those decisions more snappier in the future.
Yeah, speeding up processing and then tying that in with sustainability at the same time. Yeah, well, that's absolutely fantastic, Chris. And again, from all of us at the team and everyone watching and listening, just a massive thank you for being so open and allowing us to actually share data, allowing us to actually put the information out there. And just thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
No worries, Matt. I mean, hopefully we'll have the report out soon for everyone to take a look at. There's nothing to hide.
No, and I think that's the great thing, is that you know, we're quite open with putting the data out there. We want to continue to develop the industry, and the more people that are taking data, the better, you know, it's going to be. And if we do that in a sustainable fashion, then we're going along the right path.
Yeah, fantastic. I like that idea.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Chris.
No
Really
worries.
appreciate it.
Cheers.
Okay, thanks guys. It's now time to pass over to Ian Craig, the Senior Agronomic Consultant for ProPitch. Ian's going to close again on some of the learnings from what we did at the Hillside Golf Club. So over to you, Ian.
Okay, thanks guys. Obviously, as Neil mentioned before, 45 minutes is quite a short space of time to go into too much detail on some of our findings and our learnings from the project. However, I think the guys have given you a really good snapshot and a bit of an overview of some of the data that we collected throughout the tournament, and how Chris and his team were able to use that data to inform and adjust their management accordingly. I'd like to just look a little bit at the agronomy side of things, and some of the year-round management practices and the role that they've played in being able to produce surfaces to such a standard that we did during the Cazoo Classic. It's a bit about sustainability of performance. Obviously, we were able to deliver very, very firm, fast greens throughout the tournament, and that's all well and good, but there's no point in doing that if it's just for that 1 week of the year, and then, you know, the health of the greens suffer as a result of this. So we're going to look a little bit at the year-round management and how they were able to achieve this. And obviously that comes down to two aspects really. That's the turf health and then the soil health, what's actually going on underneath. So for me, I'll draw your attention back to the firmness and moisture numbers that we were seeing throughout the week. Obviously, we had extremely hot, dry conditions throughout, and if you look at some of these moisture numbers that we were seeing, you know, there's some, you know, from an agronomic perspective, there's some fairly alarming numbers in there. We've got some 6s and some 7s, which, if you look at these out of context, you know, would be panic stations. You'd be expecting to see severe drought stress and, you know, a resultant loss in grass cover if you've got soil moisture down at 6 and 7% for any prolonged length of time. So what we were able to do during some of the evening testing, when we had a bit more time on the greens, was have a bit of a look in more detail at what was going on underneath. Obviously, you see the picture on the side there. We've got a very good, healthy looking soil profile. There's no layers there, minimal organic matter at the top. It's a nice sandy profile. Obviously, the guys put a lot of work in throughout the year with sand top dressing in order to maintain that. Obviously, accurate nutritional inputs so that they don't build up that organic matter at the surface. What we did in the evenings was look at the soil moisture down through the profile. Obviously, when you're taking tests from the surface, you're only measuring that upper 60 millimeters, as that tends to have the biggest influence, I guess, on the overall performance of the surface. What we were doing was looking at the moisture as you progress down through the profile, and we were able to see a gradual increase in moisture as you went further down through the profile, you know, down to about 20% moisture, sitting at about 100 mil, and then at 150 and 200 mil, we were up at, you know, 25 to high 20s. So obviously, this is what you're looking for your greens. You want to keep that surface dry so that you get these firm running conditions, but you also want to have enough moisture within that profile that you can maintain adequate turf health. And obviously, Chris and his team work really hard on this throughout the year. There's a lot of top dressing, there's accurate inputs and aeration practices in order to encourage that root development and encourage that moisture down through the profile. And as you can see in that last slide there, some of the root development that we were seeing in these greens was excellent. The majority of the roots sitting around about 100 to 120 mil. We even had some outliers that were chasing down up to 200 mil down through the profile. So what that sort of says to me is it's a good indication as to why we were able to deliver such firm surfaces and have soil moisture at the surface at levels like 6 and 7% that we saw, without necessarily seeing severe drought stress or even loss of grass cover. You know, the turf is still able to access the soil moisture down through the profile, and to me that's just a very good indication of sound practice throughout the year. Like I said, it's not just the effort that goes into preparing a course for an event like the Cazoo Classic. That's just 1 or 2 weeks of intensive work. What we have to bear in mind is the work that goes on throughout the year and the part that plays in delivering surfaces to such an elite level for that tournament, but still maintaining the turf health and performance throughout the year.
Okay, thank you to all the speakers. Some really good points and insights there. So we've now got about 10 to 15 minutes left. So what we're going to do is take some questions from the audience. So bear with us and we'll just run through them. So if the speakers that are going to take the questions can unmute before, that would be fantastic. Okay, so the first question that's come in is from James, and it says, how long does it take to do the true track, and is it available for self-assessment? Great question, James. It doesn't take long. We were doing the assessment within 7 minutes in all greens in the morning. Available for self-assessment, not at the moment. We'll do it with independent assessments, but hopefully in the future. The idea is to make it accessible to all. So watch this space. I think our team, R&D team, are working very hard on this type of technology. The next question we've got here is from George, and it is, what are the best products to apply to encourage better root growth? I guess that's going back to what you were talking about, the area as you were closing.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but I would sort of divert away from products at that stage and always say that, you know, a healthy soil profile will encourage better root development naturally. So the first stop is always to control that organic matter, make sure that you've got a nice consistent profile that the roots can grow into. They will naturally grow down through the profile anyway. The roots will grow to where the moisture is, to where the moisture is being held in that profile. And as we saw from the greens at Hillside, you know, with the gradual increase in moisture down through that profile, that in itself is encouraging the root development. You know, any product applications sort of comes after that. You're looking at sort of maintaining turf health there. The most important thing to sort of encourage good root development through a profile is make sure that the moisture's moving down through that profile and not sitting in a thatchy layer at the top.
Thank you for that, Ian. The next question I've got is from Fraser, and Fraser's asking the question, how can I use this at club level? Well, I think that's a great point, Fraser, because obviously during the presentation today we're talking about Elite Tournament, the DP World Cazoo Classic, but what you can see here is you've essentially got a platform that anyone can use for self-assessment, and we can come along and do the independent assessment every so often. And I guess what's important about that is that it's a timestamp. Every assessment is done on that given day in that given condition. So it's available for all club levels and courses. And again, you know, you can get on board and do it yourself with basic equipment right the way through to some of the more technical equipment. Okay, so the next question I've got is from Shane, are you planning to do further educational segments off the back of this data? So Matt, I know that you've been quite heavily involved in young groundsmanship and discussing this and a really big champion of that. So Matt, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the answer is yes. Off the back of this data, we've got a really good insight into a lot of different aspects that we're going to be exploring with Chris. I think the relationship between the product and mechanical practices is a big one that we can explore a little bit further and really get down to the dispelling some of the myths or just hitting it with objective data measurement and actually trying to give people a few different parameters of when best to actually apply products or when best to do cultural practices. Quite a lot of what I see, I think we still need to do quite a lot of educational work on the best timing and application of processes. With the weather changing rapidly year upon year, you know, we can no longer rely on we do this in March, we do this in May, you know, so I think we need to work on a lot of the parameters behind temperatures, behind so the full holistic approach that I talked about earlier. When we look across the industry about education segments and other things that we're working on, you're right, Neil. I've had a lot of thought process into the kind of young groundsmen, young greenkeepers coming through, and what we can do to encourage, help them kind of transition from assistant to deputy to head greenkeeper, whatever that may be. So there's all different things that we're working on in the background, and hopefully you'll see that come into fruition in the next months and years as we go.
Thanks for that, Matt. I guess next one's probably for, I mean, Ian or maybe Chris to jump in here. What does this tell us about collecting moisture through the profile? And I guess, Ian, you touched on it at the end again. And Chris, it's something that you gave us the approval to do mid-tournament to take a plug from one of the greens. So one of you guys can take that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any soil profile, the aim really is to keep the surface dry. You know, that's why we build sand-based greens. Really, if we're constructing, you know, people tend to focus on sand-based greens. That's why we top dress as regularly as we do. We're looking to keep that surface dry because, you know, the results that we've seen throughout this process, you know, dry surfaces lead to firm surfaces fast. You know, basically what we're looking for in golf greens. But the trick is to make sure we are able to maintain a suitable level of soil moisture that the roots can access it, and the goal really is to get that deep rooting soil profile, and, you know, holding moisture at the right level, so that the roots can actually access this. You know, and that's what we were seeing at Hillside there. You know, we were testing moisture down through the profile. We had good root depth. While we were seeing sort of scary moisture numbers at sort of 6s and 7s, we weren't really seeing an awful lot in terms of drought stress because we had that root system there to access the moisture. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just think it was, I think the day you turned up in, we were all looking at the numbers, and we wanted to know what was keeping the plant alive. I think you came with a look of shock on your face when you first saw some of the numbers. So it's like, so that's why we said let's go hunting, and it was good of you, Eugene, to say, you know, mid-tournament, go on boys, go digging and try and find out what was keeping the plant alive.
So coming back to the question I had was, Christine has asked the question, Christine Agronomy has asked the question, what is the difference in green construction? So across the course, have you got a different construction to the greens? And maybe you can put your video back on as well so we can see your happy face.
My happy face, my camera's gone down on my laptop and I don't touch anything else. So the greens are pretty consistent across Hillside. It was built in 1911, the majority of it. And then the infamous back 9, I think it was the back 6 holes, are actually constructed in 1965. They're all made of the indigenous soil in the area, mixed with dune sand. They're all pretty consistent. The two greens are a little bit alien, are the ones that the club have done some in-house changes to in probably the last 15 years now. I haven't got the exact dates on when they were done. They dry down a little bit more. They've done more to a more modern root zone spec. They're the ones we have to keep an eye on a little bit through the tournament. They're getting a little bit fiery. But yeah, they're pretty consistent. The thatch levels are pretty good right across the site. And I think, again, like we said briefly, the more of this we do, the more we'll start to see a pattern develop right across the site with the testing.
Thank you very much, Chris. Next question is from Anonymous. What distance over a green do you measure trueness? It's actually a very good question. Part of the research and development phase, we identified points in the ball roll from the stimp meter that we wanted to remove, particular interest from the ramp. I guess a lot of people do the stimp or the green speed test, and at the end of the ramp you do get a lot of vibration and chatter from the ball off the surface. So we always take it 1 meter in from the end of the ramp. And take the recording there across the surface, and we take it set distances from the roll on the green. Next question, John B. We have, what other developments are coming with what's the future of testing? Well, I guess the future of testing is engagement with all greenkeeping staff. That's the key, is to use and harness the data and the information to make decision making easier, and that's the purpose. It's not there the be all and end all, but all these software tools and technology that we're developing is there to make it more repeatable, more objective and more transparent for everyone to make those key decisions. And I think that's the journey that Chris is on. Chris is going to hit me for some equipment pretty soon, so that's the kind of stuff that you're going to see in the future. We've got one here from Peter, I think maybe for you again, Chris, because you obviously were exposed here. What do you want, or why do you want to avoid crazy green speeds in a tournament?
Yeah, I think what people don't realise, the world is watching. You've got some of the best players in the world who play on a pretty much consistent green speed week in, week out. You've got huge contracts with companies, televised companies, sponsors. The worst thing that could happen for us at Hillside is we get all the greens, say at like 11.5, 12 foot. The wind gets up, the sun's out, sky cameras are rolling, and all the players are in the clubhouse because they're not being able to control the golf ball on the green. And that is probably one of the reasons why the European Tour and possibly the R&A tend to ease on the side of caution with green speeds. And I think it's a message that most golfers, club golfers, green staff need to get out there a little bit more. You know, the best players in the world probably on average play on 10-foot pace, and the industry as a whole needs to head towards that direction.
Certainly too fast for me, Chris, that's for sure. So I think we're coming to the end of the webinar, and I guess just to close, I want to come back to Chris again. And Chris, you know, you've got a tournament coming up next year. You know, you've entered the sustainability journey. What's the future for you at the golf club at Hillside? And obviously you've got a good team there backing you to take these steps and take these risks in tournament delivery.
I think the future for myself and the team is more of the same with where the journey we've started on. It's gone from myself meeting Ian, who I never knew before, and we did a bit of testing in lockdown, looking what yourselves had to offer. You know, the first thing I said, you know, I think Ian is from the golf side originally, and then he's moved over to football a little bit more. That this might work great in a stadium. It needs to be quick in golf. Greenkeepers need to be able to do this quickly and efficiently to gather the data for everybody to see, for the committees to see, the members to see. You know, a stadium you can take all day doing your testing, but obviously on a golf course it's got to be quick and efficient. So I think the future for me is more of that.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you again, Chris. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Kerr, for all the discussions and points today. Really good information. The report's going to be published in due course. The recording will be live on the website to re-watch, and by all means, all our team and staff are there to answer any questions and engage post-webinar. So again, thanks, guys, and catch up with you later.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.